Coming up on Mike Dub Sports, she brings a dash of Southern hospitality to the Twin Cities. And she brings a wave of empowerment for young women as a basketball coach and trainer. She is Andrea Dubose, and this is Mike Dub Sports. Hello, sports fans. I'm Mike Peden, and this is Mike Dub Sports, the show that takes you in depth with the people who build our sports community. Joining me is Andrea Dubose, although you won't be hanging on to that name for long. You're going to have a new name in a few months.
Yes, December 20th, I will be Andrea Hubbard.
She will be Andrea Hubbard, and she will be in Jamaica while the rest of us freeze our butts off. But thanks for stopping by, Andrea. So, yes, absolutely. I'm glad that you're willing to put your ego and your pride on the line for this new show of ours. So you've been hanging around basketball for a long time. You currently work as a basketball coach at Mounds View High School, and you also work as a trainer. Do you remember the first moment that got you attracted to the sport of basketball?
Yes, I'd say, so growing up in Mississippi, I have a slew of boy cousins, just watching them play the game. I was younger, and none of my younger girl cousins were interested in the sport. So I would want to play with the guys, and they would never let me play. And I just went out, started working on my game, and eventually they saw me getting better and better, and then they started letting me play with them, even though most times they beat me. So just over time, getting better, learning to talk crap with the boys, getting beat up by the boys, being bullied by the boys, but I never quit. So at that moment, just watching my boy cousins welcome me in after me perfecting my craft is the moment that I fell in love with the game. I had to be about 4 when I saw them playing, 7 when they welcomed me in, so it took a few years.
And how long did it take for you to finally best your boy cousins, as you put it?
Ooh. I'd say maybe as a 7th or 8th grader, when I was able to bully them a little bit. And then I had other male cousins coming under me. So I just, started hazing them in the way that I was hazed growing up.
And how gratifying was it when you were able to finally take them to task after they had given you some smack talk for the last few years?
It felt good. It felt really good because, then I could walk on the court all puffed up in the chest like, hey, you guys have to look at me as one of you now. You can't look down at me as the little girl cousin who always wanted to be involved because now I'm on your level. So.
And you mentioned you're from Mississippi, Hickory, Mississippi, as I understand it. So what was it like growing up in the Deep South where I'm sure the winters are nice, the summers are kind of tropical?
So I love my state. I will say this about Mississippi. Growing up where I grew up, Hickory is a small town, population of probably less than 500 or 600 people. We didn't have a lot of resources. So when I talk about growing up and playing basketball, it was on a goal or rim in our yards, playing in grass until we played so much that the grass would no longer grow. That's how I grew up. So we didn't have a lot of resources. There wasn't a huge gym nearby for us to go to. So it was just us getting out in our community, playing with each other, and that's how I grew up.
So one of those towns where everybody knew everybody.
Essentially, you ride through the town, there's not a stoplight. You get a stop sign, but not a stoplight.
I've been through a few towns like that when I've covered basketball. I think I went to a school in Austin, Lyle Pacelli, although that's down in Austin. It's a bigger city. I went down to a game in Nicollet, and it's a similar setup. So it is kind of interesting for someone like me, being a city guy, to go into those smaller towns where, as you said, you might not even have a traffic light.
It is, but the thing that I love about small towns it's that family feel. Right, everyone knows everyone. If you're playing a sport, everyone knows who you are. Regardless of what sport you're playing, you just get support from the entire community. So I do love that small town feel.
And Since you've been up here for a while, how does life in the Twin Cities in this big metro area, how does that compare to growing up in this town of 500 or 600 people in Hickory?
It's very different. I've been here for almost 4 years now. Moving here to the Twin Cities was a little challenging because I'm used to that very close-knit community or family feel. And moving to the Midwest is very different. Like Southern hospitality is real, and then you get here and it's Minnesota nice. People, they're used to and comfortable with what they're comfortable with. And if you're not in the in crowd, it's almost tough to break into it. But once you do, then you find your tribe. But it has been very different. My involvement in the community is because of basketball. So I do love that I was able to find my tribe around the sport of basketball.
And how big were sports in Hickory growing up? It sounds like everyone got together and would play pickup games out in the field or wherever you could find a place to play.
I'd say sports were big. The focus, I would say down south in general, is probably football.
Right,
when it comes to
SEC,
sports.
Alabama,
Yes.
Georgia,
Yes, definitely
LSU.
football.
So did you grow up as one of those football fans or were you just basketball?
I did. So my cousin, Eric Moles, he's from Lucedale, Mississippi. He was a big football guy. He was drafted to the Buffalo Bills. So I think he played about 11 or 12 seasons in the NFL. So yes, we were a pretty big football family too.
Who was your team?
College-wise, I'd say Mississippi State because that's where he went when he went pro, the Buffalo Bills. But I'm a Saints fan at heart. Win, lose, or draw, go Saints.
Yeah, Saints bring up not so fond memories for guys like myself, if you remember the 2009 NFC title game.
Go Saints.
But let's bring up an interesting question. Maybe who was your role model or how did you identify with the sport of basketball? Because in Mississippi, there are no pro sports. It's the D1 colleges, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Those are the two big ones. And that's it. I think the closest is Atlanta,
Yes.
or if you go down to Florida. But yeah, there aren't any pro teams around here like there are in the Twin Cities.
That is true. So again, inspired, I'd say by my male cousins, but the person who pushed me the most was probably my mom. She sacrificed so much for me to be able to do everything that I've been able to do. I was a multi-sport athlete in school, and while she couldn't come to every single game, I knew that I was being supported from afar. Basketball was my first love. I played softball, both fast and slow pitch. I ran track, also cross country, and I was a cheerleader. Yes, so multi-sport athlete.
What position did you play on the softball diamond?
I was in left field.
You were an outfielder?
An
and then
outfielder.
in the track season?
Track, 100, 200, 400 meter dash, and the high jump.
No wonder why you can move so quickly in those training videos. Now, are those sports held in different seasons? Because up here, track and baseball, softball, they're both spring sports. Is that different in Mississippi?
Ooh, I have to think back,
I know, we're taking it way back.
I know, I have to think way back. So
Deep into the time capsule, folks.
cheerleading and basketball was around the same time because I would play girls basketball, go in, change and cheer for our boys basketball games. And then football season, of course, is the fall down south. Softball, I played a year of fast pitch and a year of slow pitch. I don't recall the seasons. And then...
Were you a slugger or were you more of a contact hitter?
No.
That was a sport you did for fun.
That was a sport that I did for fun. I was really fast. So put me on the bases, I could run. I was not the best hitter. I will be the first to say that.
So you're kind of like a Byron Buxton.
I'll bunt it for you and get
Okay,
to first
so
base like that.
So you were, yeah, so
But I'm
you
not
would
a
not
slugger.
like the current era of launch angles and exit velocity
Absolutely
in baseball
not.
and softball. You're more of that Ichiro type hitter. Get
Yeah.
on base and then
Yes.
go and steal it like Ricky
Yes,
Henderson. Or
that-
Willie Mays
that's
Hayes,
me.
if you know the reference.
That is me.
That is you. What is the difference in culture that in terms of sports in a small town? Because up here you get a lot of those multi-sport athletes just because it's something for everyone to do and it's a way for you to bond. And how would you say that's different compared to coaching at a big school like Mounds View, where you still have multi-sport athletes, but it's not a case where everybody knows everybody?
So you're right. Sports here, some kids, they play because it's the social aspect. They want to play because their friends are playing. I do think when you come from a small town, a lot of people who come from small towns, they're trying to make it out, right? So you're putting in the work, the time, because you're wanting to get a scholarship to get away from that. You want something bigger, you want something better. Some people still play for the social, but I do feel like down south, it's a more competitive culture, much more competitive culture.
And you went to Newton County High School. Was that a small school, big school? We
were Division 3A at the time that I was there. And then in the state of Mississippi, I believe we go all the way up to 6A. So it was a fairly decent sized school, not extremely large. I graduated in a class of 106. So here in the state of Minnesota, that would be an extremely small school.
Yeah, so it might have been A here, and I know different states have different classification procedures. What would you say was the support, the fan support, like down in Mississippi? Because as you know, up here, basketball is a huge deal, both men and women at the prep level, college level increasingly, in the pros. What was the attitude like toward basketball when you were growing up as a player at Newton County High School in Mississippi?
Some fan support. You definitely have your loyal fans all the way through. I do think that male sports got a lot more attention than female sports did, even if you had a stellar team for female sports. But I think over time that changed. I'm gonna date myself now, but I was in high school. I graduated in 2005, and
That's my year.
Yay!
05, yay!
Class of 05. Okay, so back then, not a whole lot of support in women's sports. Particularly, I can only speak through my experience and for my school, particularly at my school. But when it came to Newton County High School, it was football all the way. Football all the way.
And I understand down south, football is the big sport with all of the athletes they've produced from Texas and Florida. And as you mentioned earlier, your cousin got to play for the Buffalo Bills for a dozen years. Was that his only team, or did he play for some others?
No, so I don't know if he did 10 or 11 seasons with the Bills. After the Bills, he went to the Texans for a year, and then after the Texans, to the Titans, and then after that, he was done.
Never got the chance to play for New Orleans, huh?
No.
That would have been your dream.
That would have been my
dream matchup.
Yes.
So you graduated in 2005, and you went to a state tournament, if my research is correct, at Newton County.
South State, I think. I believe so,
Like
yes.
I said, and I know each state has different formats for playoffs, so what did you enjoy most about the high school experience, getting to not only hoop it up with some of your teammates, but then also put on the pom-poms and the cheerleading skirt and rooting for the other teams? That is not a double duty you see often.
You know, I have always been one that likes staying busy or being overly involved. I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about high school sports in general were the connections that I was able to make with my teammates, regardless of if it were the people that I were cheering with, because we competed regionals, etc. My basketball teammates, my softball teammates. I think it's the connections. That's probably my favorite part about high school, the connections that I was able to make.
And how much did you learn about time management early on? Because three-sport athletes, we hear about that up here quite a bit, even in the sport of basketball, where folks like Lindsey Becker, Sarah Scalia, basketball is the primary sport, but they do other things. You know, you did 4 sports.
I did.
Well, I guess it depends if you count fast pitch and slow pitch as separate.
Different
Or
seasons.
cheerleading, however you want to count it. You did 4 activities, and every winter for a few years, you were pulling double duty.
Yes, I was. You learn time management very early on, and it's not just sports. So you have to take into consideration academics, because when you think about athletes, it's a student athlete. And I always stress the student piece first, because yes, that's high school, but if you're thinking about going to college, the student piece comes first. So you learn time management as a student, because you have to get your work done before the sports ever come into the picture, right? So you learn time management very early on. Some days I was on bus rides going to games trying to get an assignment done that was due the next day. So yeah, it's helped me in life, in my current career as well.
And I imagine you were always on top of your studies.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Graduated with honors, I presume?
I did. So when I graduated high school, I decided to go to a community college. Very close to home, again, very close-knit community, and I had opportunities to go to some decent schools, but I was afraid to leave home. So I went 15 minutes from home to East Central Community College. I had a pretty good career there. I later went to University of Arkansas-Monticello. I did finish my bachelor's degree there in marketing. I think I graduated with I remember all of my GPAs. This is terrible. I think I graduated with a 3.6 GPA. From there, I went to Alcorn State University. I actually started my MBA at Mississippi State and then transferred over to Alcorn State. Finished my MBA with a 3.4 GPA and then worked on a master's in ag economics, and I finished with a 4.0. So yeah.
So you a lot of honors
Books
in that
first.
resume.
Books first, athlete second.
Now, how did you handle the recruitment process? Because you decided to go to community college, which is not an uncommon move for a lot of athletes, no matter where you are. But when you were getting approached by recruits to play for their teams, how did you respond to that?
So interestingly enough, I'm a first generation college student. I wasn't all familiar with the process. And every single year that I played basketball, just about, I had a different coach from 7th grade all the way up to 12th. Luckily, I was blessed. Coach Willis Tullis, my senior year, who was very familiar with the recruitment processes, everything, he helped me navigate it. He was pushing me to UGA. He got a call from Andy Landers at Georgia to get me to verbally commit over the phone. It was after a practice, and being a senior in high school, that's a big decision I wasn't ready to make. And Andy wanted an answer right then. And for me, my coach never made my decisions for me. He gave me advice and kind of helped me navigate them. I was not ready to leave home. And so I made the decision to stay home. But as far as the recruitment process is concerned, I wasn't familiar with it at all. I played the sport of basketball because I loved it. I knew that I was good. I knew that I wanted a scholarship, but I didn't know how any of that worked. Because books first. I always stress that books first. I knew that I was going to get an academic scholarship if nothing else worked out. But I got both at my community college, and when I went to my 4-year college, I got my academic scholarship and the athletic scholarship to go along with it.
It sounds like you could have auditioned for Jeopardy too on top of all that with your studious academic abilities. But we talk about that in jest. That is a highly honorable distinction, so I do want to give you props for that.
Thank you.
Because that is not an easy thing to do, like getting a 4.0 and getting both academic and athletic scholarships. That's a great message for the next generation.
I agree.
And speaking of, when you were part of that next generation, without any maybe pro teams nearby, you talked about your mother as a source of inspiration. With you and your attachment to basketball, were there any players in the college or pro ranks that you wanted to be like when you grew up?
Yes, I don't know if you guys know this name, Betsey Harris. She was probably the one player that I looked up to the most. Her mom was my 4th grade teacher. She played University of Alabama, I believe. And she was playing overseas at the time, but her mom being my 4th grade teacher, she would come back. And she would come to the classroom sometimes and she'd come in and play with us. But she was probably the one person growing up that I looked up to and wanted to be like as a player. There's another player, Kristen Cheney. She was a big softball kid, great at softball, but she was another player that I looked up to. And she's from my hometown, of course. And then Tamika Foley. Those will probably be the three players that I looked up to the most. Tamika Foley, she was from Hickory, Mississippi. She was actually from my hometown, where Kristen and Betsey Harris were both from Decatur, Mississippi.
And have you come across anyone? I know you recently visited your hometown for a family reunion. Anybody that comes up to you and says, "I want to be just like you when I grow up"?
I have kids doing that all the time, and it just touches my heart in a way, because you may be familiar with my business, EmpwrHER, that I launched here in Minnesota. And I launched it because I wanted to be for young women here what I did not have growing up. So when I do go back home and I have like my niece or her friends or other younger women that back home reaching out to me saying, "Hey, like, I want to train with you." I have teammates who ask me, "Do you ever think about coming home to our high school to do a camp for our kids, you know, so that they can be exposed to you, so that they can know who you are, and like this is where you came from, and so that they can see where you are now." So I get that all the time from kids, from parents, you name it, and it makes me feel good to know that me, miles away from home, I still have people that think of me in that regard.
Well, that's a good tease for EmpwrHER. We'll talk a little more about that as we continue this conversation. But you mentioned being homesick and how that played into your decision to go to a community college. What was that experience like, playing at the JUCO level, is what they say? And did you feel you were ready when you made the move to Arkansas-Monticello, which, you know, did take you away from home?
Absolutely. So I come from a small town, Hickory, Mississippi. I went to school at East Central Community College in Decatur, Mississippi, maybe 15 minutes from home. Being that I was used to that small town feel, going to East Central was it was a natural fit for me. But what I will say about it, those smaller classrooms and having like personal relationships with my instructors and or advisors, it prepared me for that next step, going to my 4-year university. And I've had conversations, some of my friends who took that leap right away to their 4-year university, just having conversations about not feeling like they were prepared to do so. So I'm grateful that I made that decision to go to a 2-year college. It definitely prepared me for the journey that was ahead.
And you ended up at a Division II school in Arkansas-Monticello. What is that experience like? Because we hear a lot about Division I, whether it's mid-major or Power 5. You know, a lot of Minnesota kids, for example, you hear they're going to Lehigh. Sarah Scalia's going to Minnesota. Paige Becker's UConn. And, you know, kudos to them, and they're certainly worthy of their recognition. Division II, Division III kind of fly under the radar.
I think that there are some great athletes that actually go Division II. For me, I had a great experience. I met some of my closest friends. They are going to be in my wedding. Puerto Rico, from Texas, Louisiana, you name it. I met people from across the U.S. When I went to my 4-year school, when I went to Arkansas-Monticello. Just meaningful connections, people that years and years and years and years of friendship, me going there. I do think had I went to a larger school, the focus would have been books and basketball, and the connections that I would have made would have been amongst my teammates. At Arkansas-Monticello, I was close to guys on the baseball team, girls on the softball team, girls who ran cross country, like you name it. It wasn't a large school. It still had that small town feel. Everybody in the town was at sporting events, supporting. You knew everyone. I'm happy with the decisions that I made. I couldn't imagine my life if I had chosen a different path. I can't imagine what it would have been like.
And who knows, if you had gone to another school, you wouldn't have a school record that still holds to this day. Do you remember that game? You had 11 steals, I think, against Lane College, still a school record. Do you remember that game, and are you surprised that that record has held up this long? 11 years now, I believe.
You're right. I do remember that game. So when I play the game of basketball, I'm a player that plays both ends of the floor. And you don't find that often. You have players that they love defense, or you have players that just love offense. I played both ends of the floor, but my favorite end of the floor is definitely defense. In that game, before the game, I actually said to myself, I want to break a school record, and I knew I wanted it to be the still record. And I was determined to do it, and I did it. I always feel like anything you put your mind to, you can accomplish it as long as you don't waver. That game was a mindset defensive game for me the entire time. And I didn't stop until I broke the record. And when I broke it, my coach was like, hey, job well done. I will never forget that. Coach Chris Ratcliffe patted me on my back, and he was like, job well done. You broke the record. I was like, okay, you can take me out now.
I imagine you won that game?
We did.
Okay.
We did. I don't remember the score, but I think we won by quite a bit.
I was like, I would hope so, because if had the result gone the other way, it would have been kind of an awkward celebration.
Yes.
So you said defense was your thing. Why did you value defense so much as a player?
I think when it comes to defense, that's something it's here, right? Like, you have to have the heart to want to play it. Offense, you can be taught how to shoot, you can be taught how to handle the ball, you can be taught how to make all these different moves, but it takes a different player to want to sit and focus on defense in a game. And I think I think every single team needs that one person who's going to buckle down and play defense. I'm a big energy person too. So when you have like high defensive energy can't be created nor destroyed, only transferred. I think it picks your other teammates up to want to do the same thing. I think that's why I always focused on defense, because that's one thing that can also set you apart. You got all these offensive players on a team. What is going to be the one thing that sets you apart? And for me, that was defense.
And if you can recall, what was your most embarrassing moment as a player?
Oh, man.
Because I'm sure every player has that horror story that seems like terrible, and then you laugh. Yeah, and then you laugh it off, right? It's one of those, you hate it when it happens, but it's all part of the journey when it's over.
Oh, wow. So I've had several. I will be the first to admit that. Most embarrassing moment. I'll say this. I was extremely fast, right? So you put someone...
I had no idea. Being all that sprinter, that 100, 200, I thought you were just the slow and steady, and you were...
Extremely fast. So you take someone who's extremely fast, you put them on a basketball court, defensive player, get a steal, you go down, learning how to harness like my energy and speed and shoot a layup for the life of me. Just boom off the glass. Luckily, I've learned, body control. But my coach would tell me, hey, just pull up at the three-point line. So I had the green light and a fast break to shoot a three versus a layup. So my most embarrassing moments were those times where, and it's been several, just get a steal, and it's simple. Just go make a layup. I couldn't buy a layup. It took me a while.
And you're not alone. I think Monica Wright, when she was a professional, had a hard time with layups. And even now, whether it's high school, college, or pro, it baffles me sometimes at the folks that have a hard time making the bunnies. So it's certainly not exclusive or unique to you, but it is interesting to think about. And there is kind of a mental aspect to making a layup.
I agree. In my training, I have found you can sit here all day long with no defense and go in and practice layups and you'll make them all the time. But until you start to throw in like those other obstacles or getting pads and hitting kids with them, like most times when you go in for a layup, you have someone defending you. Like, do you know how to finish with contact? Do you know how to finish with pressure? I don't think that we practice those things. So yeah, over time I've learned, hey, maybe I should have been training this way instead of just going out shooting hundreds of layups a day, trying to fix the problem. So yeah.
And since you were gracious enough to share your most harrowing moment, I recall calling a state wrestling tournament years ago where I referred to a match as a fight, something the high school league was not fond of, trying not to associate those two terms together. And then recently at a parade, we were interviewing someone on a planter's nutmobile. It's shaped like a peanut. And I don't know why, but at the end I closed the interview with, "Don't forget your nuts." And as soon as I said it, my camera operator and myself were like, did I just say that?
It's like, oh, probably would have turned your mic off at that point.
Well, it's on the air for all to see.
Out.
If you go to the Valley Access Channel's YouTube page, you'll find it. So not my proudest moment, but
I'm gonna have to check that out.
One, I'll probably laugh over a few drinks. What were some other fun moments from your time at Arkansas-Monticello? Because you had that one steals record, that was it, but what were some other things you were proud to be a part of there?
So, me making the decision to go there, when I went to visit the school and they talked about the school record, it wasn't great. Part of me making my decision was because I knew I wanted to go into a program to help turn it around. Getting there with my teammates, after that first year, we did pretty good. We won a lot more games than they had won in the past, and we got better the year after that. So for me, I'd say most people expect perfection. It's all about progress. And I teach that often. It's about progress. It's not about perfection. Like you have to trust the transition. You got to trust the process. So I think for me, the moments that I enjoyed most was every single practice where we're sitting here battling together, right? Holding each other accountable and stepping out on the court every single game, win or lose, having each other's backs and knowing that we were shifting our program. We were shifting our program in the direction that our coach and our AD wanted it to go.
And after you were done, after you graduated with your 4.0 GPA, I had three...
I wish. Not undergrad.
Well, I mean, when you were finished with college, right, I know you continued with your master's, but how did you stay involved in the sport, or did you go off in another direction? Because I spoke with Alexis Gray Lawson. She turned pro and then she took up coaching. You played, maybe didn't have that same professional path, but you found a way to stay involved with the sport.
So actually, I took a different route. I knew after school that I wanted to go back to get my master's degree. And it's interesting because basketball wasn't on the radar when it comes to coaching. Like I had opportunities after college, like if I wanted to go play overseas or if I wanted to try out for WNBA teams, I had those opportunities. I didn't take them.
You don't regret it, do you? I'm kidding.
No, I don't.
You've had a very fine and a very distinguished career, so I tease a little bit. But
I do not.
What led you to decide to enter the graduate studies world and enter the business world as you have?
I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, always. So that's part of the reason why I've made some of the life decisions that I've made. And basketball was not on the radar. And although I've always felt like I was supposed to be doing something around basketball, I didn't know what that looked like. But God always has a funny way of pulling you back to what your purpose is. And part of the reason why I did get involved in basketball here is it's random. At work, both my fiance and I work for Land O'Lakes. And on his boss at the time, her daughter was a 6th grader playing on a traveling team for Mounds View, and they were looking for a coach. And I'm sure my fiance spoke me up. He spoke me up.
He sounds like the guy who would, speak the world of you.
He does all the time. And before you know it, I'm getting like text messages like, "Hey, so I told these people about you. Like, are you interested in coaching?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" So I went to one of their practices. Ben Robbins, he was their head coach. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to do this. First time ever coaching, great group of girls, some growing pains, but I stuck with that group for 6th grade and for 7th grade. And after that first year, a parent said to me, "Hey, do you do any training at all?" I was like, "No, like this was my first year coaching. I've never done any training." And they're like, "Well, you probably should. Here's an app that I think you should sign up for." So I signed up, and then I started getting all these requests like, okay. And I love focusing on fundamentals. So I would just start writing up plans. And most of the kids that I was getting at the time, they were younger kids just wanting to get better, focus on skill. And since then it's grown. I train kids of all ages at the high school level. And one of the pieces that has been missing, regardless of if I train a senior or if I train a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grader, skill development has been the one area where the mark has been missed for many, because most times you see kids, they just go in the gym, they just start throwing up shots. but are you shooting age-appropriate shots?
How's your form looking?
Yes.
I remember I took part in a
Right.
training video. I had to shoot it where one of the instructors teaches you how to shoot with using
Yes.
your guiding hand. Like there is an art to
There is an art to it.
your shooting motion.
There is definitely an art to it, and with every single client, it's like that part was missed. Like they didn't understand, like, what are the correct mechanics for a layup? Well, my old coach taught me this way. And so it became me teaching them, but also challenging them to teach me. Talk me through why you do this way. Does this make sense to you? Forcing them to think about things too. There was my path back to basketball because of my fiance and because of a parent who asked me to start training.
And especially in this era, you don't want Lindsey Becker or Alexis Pratt or some of the others you train, although Pratt's got it down pat where you swipe the ball, go coast to coast and miss the layup because that puts you in the not top 10. Now, you mentioned you and your husband work together, or future husband. Not quite. I jumped the gun. In December, though, that will be accurate. How is he as an athlete?
He was a baseball player. He was a baseball player, but we get in the gym sometimes, play a little bit of one-on-one. I'm not going to embarrass him, but I will say, it's an even split. He's bigger, he's stronger, so go figure. But there are games where
You're more elusive, though, I think, with your speed.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, who's the more athletic of this couple?
That's tough. He's pretty athletic. That's a tough question. I plead the fifth.
You know what? We should do a follow-up, and we'll have the two of you go one-on-one after the wedding's done, because I'm sure the two of you are still planning, and then we'll settle it.
Let's do that. We should do that.
And then we'll figure out who the fastest one is, because I'd like to see how quickly you can sprint down the court.
We need to do that, because he and we've been having this conversation for a year on who's the fastest. So we should do that, and we should get it on camera so that there's always record of it.
So coming up on TSB television, Andrea and Gareth will duke it out to find out who the more athletic one is, and then she and I will do suicides to find out who can complete them the fastest. I have a feeling she'll have the edge. And you moved up here, as I understand, because of a job. And how nervous were you to get into coaching and training, and how long did it take for you to become comfortable with it? Because now you hype it up all the time, but like you said, you weren't sure how you wanted to get involved. Here's this opportunity, and I have to imagine there were some butterflies.
Absolutely. So for basketball, I've always been on the player side of it. It's different as a coach. Definitely had butterflies. I was a little nervous, but I'd say my love for the game and my love for working with young women, it just outweighed it all. You're constantly learning and evolving as a coach. First year, you're not going to get it right. Second year, you're not going to get it right. You're constantly learning. I'd say in the past few years in my coaching, I feel like I get better. I get better at it. I learn a little more. I'm teaching my girls, but more importantly, I'm learning from them, understanding what my coaching style is and adjusting it. I'm a different coach when I'm coaching Mounds View High School basketball players than I am when I'm working with my 7th or 8th grade AAU team. Completely different coach.
What's the difference in approach between the high school level where you've got a Lindsey Becker type athlete who understands it, and 7th, 8th graders? I know you stayed with one team, but they're still picking up on the fundamentals and some of the aspects of the game.
I'd say at the younger level, it's critical because they're developing young women. So I'm a little different in my approach on how I communicate with them, how I'm teaching them, the conversations that I have with them, really trying to build meaningful connections with them, making them understand that, yes, I'm the person in authority, but you should challenge me sometimes. Like, that's okay. It's okay for you to ask me questions, because a lot of times they don't think that it's okay. They're afraid to make mistakes. And I encourage them, hey, you have to be willing to make mistakes if you want to improve, if you want to learn from it. Because one thing that I have found, experience is the best teacher. If you don't make this mistake, how are you going to know to fix it? And my approach with my high school girls, it's a little bit different. Like, we have fun, but they know that I mean business. Like, my expectation for you, especially at this level, you should be working hard without without being told to. Like, that speaks to who you are. What is your work ethic when your coach isn't in the gym? So my approach with those girls are a little different. Yes, I'm tough on both, but I do approach my younger girls. I take it a little easier on them. They may speak differently, but I think I take it a little easier.
But those younger girls, they know the classics.
Yes.
I saw they were
Yes.
lip syncing along to some TLC and some other artists of that era that you and I grew up with. So
I love to have fun. I love to have fun with my girls. They will say that I love to have fun, but they know when to turn it off, and they know when I mean business. So.
And going on the experience, it was Yoda who once said, the best teacher failure is. That's from episode 8, if you don't know the reference. So at Mounds View, I don't know how much you think about this consciously, but as I understand it, you're one of the few, if not only, members of color on that program. How did you respond to that? Because you joined them, I think, a couple years ago. And how do you handle that situation? It's, again, not something where I think you're worried or you're fearful, but I have to imagine, you're trying to, set yourself and just highlight this example of
Absolutely.
how anyone can be involved.
Absolutely.
So how I guess do you blend in, if for lack of a better phrase, with this Mounds View program?
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say that, because this morning I was looking. I have my basketball girls' photos hanging on my fridge. And when I do look at the photo, I am the only female of color. It is interesting because I know that for many of those girls, I may be the only female of color that they're exposed to as they matriculate through high school. So I always try to be an example to them. Being from down south, I actually went to my high school, was a predominantly white high school. So I'm used to blending in, right? But it is different, especially when you're the person in authority or the person that's being looked up to. You have to be that example for those girls. And so I'm happy. I'm happy that I am in the position that I'm in, because I want them to know how to interact with someone who looks like me. I want them to know how to communicate with someone who looks like me. Like, we're all human, right? And so I'm happy that I'm in the position that I'm in. I'm happy that they get that exposure to me before they go out into the real world.
That is good to note, and I imagine, from what I saw last year, the players accept you instantly. You're a part of their extended family, and so, how were you embraced in Mississippi, in this small town, and then going to a high school where not everyone looked like you, and then you take up a coaching job where here you are in a similar situation?
I don't think too much of it. Of course, when you walk into the room and you're the only person that looks like you, you feel that. But you just gotta keep pushing, right? You gotta keep pushing, because if you make a big deal of it, then everybody else, they're gonna make a big deal of it too. I typically don't have issues being accepted, because I know how to build meaningful connections with people. Like, it's one thing to sit here and say, oh yeah, like, we have a relationship. Do you have a meaningful connection? Like, if you have a conversation with my girls, they know that I care about them. You can have a conversation with their parents know that I care about them. Otherwise, you wouldn't trust me in the care of your child in one-on-one training sessions. So I think that that's probably one of the most important things. You got to be able to build connections with people. I don't care if you're yellow, green, orange, purple. You have to
Klingon, Dalek. Maybe not Daleks. They're not as friendly too.
You have to be able to just build connections with people. And when you build those connections, they start to trust you. They start to see you for you. So that, for me, that's been the most important thing, for sure. That's been the most important thing.
And that's sound advice. Given my background, it's a similar situation. Not on the racial spectrum, but and a lot of folks know about my condition on the autism spectrum. It's a little harder to detect, but those who support you, they'll be with you no matter what.
Exactly. You find your people, you find your tribe, and that's all that matters.
If you'd like to support TSB Television sports programming, check us out at patreon.com/TSB Television or paypal.me/TSB Television. Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Andrea Dubose, and thank you for watching Mic'd Up Sports.